Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Captain Roger Spurgeon, the commander of the Impd Homicide Branch, and I want to welcome you this evening to our first ever virtual community conversation. A couple housekeeping things to talk about here a little bit. After we have presenters, which will start off the first hour of this event, we will then move to a question and answer section. So it's roughly an hour of presentation, followed by roughly an hour of Q&A. As far as the Q&A is concerned, I would ask that you would please go to chat and type your questions into the chat area rather than speaking. That would be helpful to all of us. And we will get to as many questions as we possibly can. I have started the chat by adding my email to the very top. So if for some reason we don't get to your questions, please send me an email about your question, and I will do my best to get you an answer. So with that, we will get started here. So the objective is to learn more about the Homicide Branch's role in the department's mission to reduce violent crime, and the investigative process, how we work together with the rest of our partners, and you will hear from the 6 different disciplines that we work hand in hand with. So with that, Chief Taylor, if you have some opening remarks, if you're here, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that. So I've been with this department since 93, or at least in Indianapolis since 1993. And this is my 34th year in law enforcement. I welcome you to this discussion. I hope that you will find it informative. Now, here's one thing I know. We've done these a few times, and I know there's some of you that are here just to get a better understanding of what happens with homicide investigations as far as the Impd is concerned. But I know some of you are also here because you have experienced a homicide, maybe in your family or some other loved one, or maybe just a friend. I will tell you that my heart goes out to you. I'm a man of faith, and I pray for this city on a daily basis. But I have a special appreciation for those of you who are dealing with maybe the murder of a loved one. My journey in that area started on November 30th of 1998, or I'm sorry, 1998, when my father-in-law was murdered by a 12-year-old in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So my wife's father. And I will never forget that day when we got that phone call. It is burned into my memory. And even though that young man was eventually caught and convicted and served time in prison, you never really get past that loss. I guess the thing that is most not necessarily disturbing, but most impactful to me is I understand that all cases don't work out that way. I wish I could tell you that we had 100% clearance for every case that we have, but we don't, and neither does any other police department. But I will tell you that the detectives and the officers that work for the Impd do their best to make those things happen, to get those arrests and get those criminals off the street, and so that those families can get some type of justice. But I will tell you that whether we make an arrest or whether or not someone serves time, it's not going to lessen the blow, unfortunately. Time does heal to some extent, but we can't replace your loved one. And I don't say that to be depressing or discouraging or anything like that. There are other things that fill in those blanks. Hopefully, you don't let those things impact you in such a way that it has a negative outcome on your life. We do have groups, victim assistance, and the like that will help you through some of those things. but I am also a realist, and I know that missing that loved one is something that but never changes, but it can be managed. So you are in for some great speakers. You will be done with this, and you'll leave it highly informed. I unfortunately will not be able to stay with you the whole night, but Captain Spurgeon has been in this job for a long time. You will have his email, and if you need to ask me a question or get in touch with me, you can do that through him. But I appreciate you all being on this. I keep hearing the people ringing in, so I know it's a good group. But don't be afraid to ask questions, but keep your ears open. I think you'll learn a lot. And hopefully, if nothing else happens at the end of the night, you'll at least feel that this portion of time hasn't been a waste, that you leave here informed, hopefully proud of the IMPD and the steps that we take to try to make things the best we can for you, the citizens of Indianapolis. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Chief Taylor. And as he had mentioned, my email address, which I put it into the chat, but in case any of you aren't able to access the chat, the email address is Roger, ROGER .Spurgeon, SPURGEON @Indy, INDY.gov, GOV. I'll repeat that later on. Next up is Deputy Chief Craig McCart, if he's here.
Thanks, Captain. Hey, I'm just going to take, I'm going to keep my remarks very brief because I know there's a lot of important information to get to. But first and foremost, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I think it says a lot that you've taken the time to be here. And certainly what you'll hear through a lot of this is the importance of the community and in everything that we do. And I think the fact that you're here shows an important step toward that. As has already been mentioned, we have done these community conversations now for probably a few years at different locations throughout the city. And those came to a screeching halt about a year ago, like so many other things did. And this is our first virtual that we have done. And I'll tell you, I'm really excited as I look over at the participant list. I think we sit at 89 right now, which is awesome because that's more than we've had before. So we're anxious to tell you a little bit about what these folks do who are involved in homicide investigations, and that's really the purpose of this here tonight is to help everyone understand a little bit about what goes into an investigation. I think with a better understanding of the investigation, we can eliminate some frustrations and some misunderstandings that people sometimes have when wondering why detectives do what they do, or maybe why they're not doing something. And I think that the detectives will take an opportunity tonight to explain some of that. Also, just again, to reiterate how important the community is in what we do in these investigations, and that we can't do it without your help. So again, thank you for being here. I want to thank all the presenters because I know a lot of time and effort has gone into putting this together. The men and women who do this job, who are the detectives, the crime lab techs, the coroners, and that sort of thing. I mean, they do it because they care. They do it because they're fighting for justice for the victims and the families of victims. Being a homicide detective, being a coroner, not necessarily pleasant jobs, but they do it because they care and because they're trying to make Indianapolis a safer and better place to live and to bring justice to these families. So with that, Captain, I'll turn it back over to you and the presenters. And please, if you have questions, we'll get to as many as we can. And if not answered tonight, we will answer them in an email form later. So thank you very much. Roger, I think you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Chief. And I'd like to present Lieutenant Tanya Terry so that she may speak about the homicide staffing levels. Lieutenant Terry?
Hi, I'm just going to go over briefly what staffing levels are in the homicide unit and the aggravated assault units, and a little bit about what kinds of investigations each of those units conducts. Next slide, please. The aggravated assault unit investigates incidents involving the discharge of a firearm where bodily injury results, but death is not probable, including incidents involving juvenile suspects. They also investigate incidents involving the use of a knife or other cutting instrument if serious bodily injury occurs, and regular assault cases that result in serious bodily injury regardless of the weapon used, except those resulting in short-term unconsciousness and/or minor bone fractures. The aggravated assault unit is staffed with one captain, Captain Spurgeon. He is in charge of homicide and aggravated assault. One lieutenant, 3 sergeants, and 15 detectives that cover 3 different shifts. This is an increase in staffing since 2018 that includes the addition of 1 sergeant and 7 more detectives, allowing round-the-clock coverage, whereas before it was just day shift hours. The homicide unit investigates any death which has occurred or is likely to occur as a result of unnatural or unknown circumstances. That includes murder, suicide, non-vehicular accidents, certain child deaths that did not involve the caregivers. We also partner with the child abuse, missing persons, and aggravated assault units on cases where death occurs after the case was initially assigned. Homicide is no longer required to respond to unintentional overdoses. The homicide unit is staffed with, again, 1 captain, 2 lieutenants, 4 sergeants, 28 detectives, 2 of which are retiring this year. We have 4 shifts, day, middle, late tack, and late. And our I'm sorry, did I say 28 of those detectives? 2 are retiring. Then onto the cold case unit, we have 2 sergeants, 2 detectives, both of whom are retiring in 2021, and 1 reserve detective. The homicide supervisor's responsibilities include monitoring caseloads for balanced case assignments and providing assistance as needed, maintaining up-to-date knowledge on individual case progress, locating investigative resources in real time as the detectives are needing them, maintaining day-to-day staffing levels, and investigate a limited number of cases as the lead detective. Primarily, if a sergeant is on duty, they will be the lead on a CERT investigation, and on the occasion, they will be the lead on other homicide investigations as needed. And that is all that I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Lieutenant Terry. So next up, we'll have the homicide detective role. And this will be by Detective Gary Smith. Detective Jose Torres is not going to be able to be with us tonight. So Detective Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being a part of this. As the captain said, my name is Gary Smith. I'm a detective that works in homicide investigations, and I currently work on middle shift. I fill some other smaller roles within the unit, like training. Some of the objectives that I'm going to go over all today is just sort of understanding our overall goal as homicide investigators, what we do to seek the truth while we're trying to protect the public and protecting people's rights. To give you an idea of what the process of the investigation is like, I'll explain a little bit about the team concept and how we work with other units and other departments in order to get the job done. A lot of the volume of the work that we do at the scene, how we interact with victims' families, suspect families, witnesses, and things like that. We'll talk a little bit about how we can and cannot use information that's given to us, a little bit about trial preparation, and then we'll cover dealing with some unsolved cases. The initial response in the scene, the way that we're notified as homicide investigators is we either hear the radio, the run come out on the radio, or we have our control operators communicate to us that they are in need of a homicide detective at a certain location for a certain incident. We'll respond, and usually it's every detective that's working at the time for that shift. We'll go out together and work that together. prior to that, obviously, officers are responding as quickly as possible, trying to learn as much as they can and get everything under control as best they can until we're able to get there and take control of the scene. One thing that officers, we ask them to do a lot is to separate witnesses. If you've ever been on one of these scenes and you've been a witness, then you may know what I mean by that. But basically the need to do that is because we can't have witnesses talking to one another. We have to have independent statements from those witnesses about what they saw and not what they saw, and then talk to another witness about and learned from someone else. The integrity of the scene is of the utmost importance to us. And sometimes that unfortunately lends to things that are sort of unsightly. For example, a lot of times I know being on scenes, parents have been upset or other family members have been upset because their loved one is deceased and still lying there. And the reason that is because of the integrity of the scene. If we were to move them, obviously, if there was a need for medical attention, they would be transported. But everything has to sort of be a frozen picture in time in order for us to have the best chance at recovering all of the evidence and then be able to use that in a future prosecution of a suspect should we identify one and develop probable cause for their arrest. Once we learn of it, obviously we respond as quickly as we can to the scene and or the hospital, whatever the case may be. But once we get there, it's a matter of slowing things down. And if you've ever been exposed to one of these incidents, you know that these hours to process. And after you've heard from everybody tonight, you'll sort of understand why that is. But we want to slow things down as much as we can so that we're not rushing through any of this and we're not missing something that we should miss because we're going too quickly. Sometimes we'll do a canvas that night. It depends on how many detectives we have there and what's going on. And by canvas, I mean we'll go door to door and on everyone's door in that neighborhood, looking to see if there's any that may have seen or heard something, if they may have cameras on their house that's becoming more prevalent that might be able to show footage of things. And then we'll also go to businesses that are nearby to try to do the same thing. The no promise of closure kind of goes back to what Chief Taylor was saying earlier. I'm very careful about using that word with families just because, like Chief Taylor said, you could have an arrest, a conviction, and all the time in the world, and it may not bring closure to you. So that's one reason we don't promise anything like that. All we can really promise is that we're going to work the case to the best of our. Going back to some of the problems that we have with our initial stages of the investigation, it goes back to those separation of witnesses. If you have a scene, for example, if something happened at a nightclub or something like that, you have a lot of witnesses and usually they outnumber officers. So sometimes separation of witnesses becomes an issue. So that's why sometimes you'll see witnesses put in police officers' vehicles and stuff like that. Always open to suggestions on how to better separate people. I know there's sometimes a concern with alienating those and other people seeing that have been placed in cars and things like that, and then rumors start and whatnot. So if there's any suggestions on what we can do to better accommodate witnesses, we're more than welcome to listen. As far as the media goes, sometimes the media can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes a good tool that we can use to put information out there that's obviously a public safety concern, or in order to put information out there to try to identify any other people in the community that might know information that would help with the investigation. On the flip side of that, sometimes information gets out there that we're not necessarily wanting out there, and it can cause problems with an investigation. So we work closely with the media when we can, or at least through the PIAs and whatnot. The interviews need to be done as quickly as possible when it comes to witnesses. Witnesses are usually most likely to talk to us then. Sometimes you'll have a witness that doesn't want to talk in front of people or doesn't want people to know that they're talking to the police. So we'll set up something later, or we'll move them to another location in order to talk to them. But usually we try to deal with witnesses as quickly as possible so that we have that information. And then sometimes witnesses change their mind about cooperating with the investigation later on. So if we've done that early, then we already have it taken care of. And that just kind of goes back to, witnesses wanting to leave. Will we ever see them again? Will we see them at another location at another time, and whatnot? One big question that we get as homicide detectives, especially on the scene, is why the family cannot be allowed to enter the scene or see the body. It really goes back to that preservation of the crime scene and the preservation of the evidence. The law of transference, anybody that comes in or leaves that scene is, even on a microscopic level, leaving something behind or taking something with them. And it can cause evidentiary issues. It can introduce, for example, if we were allow a family member to, touch their loved one, use DNA or prints into the scene that could pose problems later in an investigation or more specifically during a court trial. And then usually the volume of information that we have coming at us at the beginning stages of investigation is there's a lot of it, which is another reason that we slow things down. So that way we're not missing any of that information that's coming to us. As far as the team goes on the scene, you obviously have the Impd responding officers, detectives, and whatnot. We're also assisted on every scene by the Marion County Crime Lab, who is responsible for processing the scene. They'll talk about that themselves. Marion County Deputy Coroner will also respond to the scene, and the decedent will be taken from the scene to the coroner's office by them. Should we get to the point where we are talking about making an arrest, we work with the Marion County Prosecutor's Office to make sure that everything is in line for the arrest to be made, and then for that case to be assigned to a prosecutor and on through the trial process. But arguably the most important thing, the most important part of the team is the public. And if we have witness cooperation or public, that know information coming forward with that information and sharing it with us, it greatly improves the odds that we are to figure out who is as far as the organization, I said earlier that a lot of times when we respond to a scene, it will be every detective that's working from that shift. And usually we'll respond to the scene. Now, I may not always stay on the scene as lead detective. I may delegate that role to another detective that's assisting me because I have to go and do interviews, and that's usually how it works. We may do interviews there on the scene. We may try to transport witnesses back to do interviews in other places. It's all one of those things where working as a team is the only way to really get these things done. You'll have sometimes detectives writing warrants, sometimes detectives going to the hospital, sometimes the detectives are doing the. So it's a team approach when we're on the scene trying to get that accomplished and gather the information. Once we've all got it, we get together and talk about what information we learned so that the lead detective has all of that. As far as interacting with family members, the way we typically do that, I can speak for myself when I say, is that usually one family member is sort of the representative for the family, and that keeps things a little more simple. If I'm going through one family, usually it's the next of kin, the wife or husband or the mother or father, whatever the case may be, because if I, as a detective, have to talk to 4 or 5 different family members and explain it to 4 or 5 different times, that's less time that I have to work on the case. And then also, you sometimes will have family members that the next of kin doesn't necessarily want involved in the investigation or talking to the detective or whatnot. So we'll use one family member. Doesn't mean we won't talk to other family members, especially if those other family members happen to be witnesses or happen to learn information about the case. We'll absolutely listen to them. We're probably just not going to necessarily be giving them updates on the status of the case and things like that. Sometimes you'll have interactions with the family, and sometimes rightfully so, because family members are upset. They've just lost a loved one. So, it can sometimes be adversarial. But it doesn't have to be. We as detectives, we see this all too often, but we understand to the extent that we can that as a family member of someone that's just been killed, you're dealing with a lot. And we try to be mindful of that, and we try to be respectful of that. But we also understand that sometimes family members are upset at the situation, and sometimes even with us for whatever reason. But that's where dignity and compassion and then being respectful with that long way, and that goes both ways as well. Information and tips are the lifeblood of the investigation into these cases. The more information that we have, usually the better, and I say usually because not always the information that we get is going to be beneficial to the case. Hearsay being a big problem. If a witness tells someone that they saw something and then that person comes and tells us, we can't really use it as a witness statement because it's hearsay information. We sort of need it. Well, we do need to hear it from the witness themselves. That doesn't mean we can't necessarily still use the information as lead information, but it's always going to be better to hear the information directly from a witness than it is as hearsay information. And then it goes back to is the person that's a witness of the information or source of the information willing to meet with us, and then at some point in time, should an arrest be made, testify in court as to what they witnessed. When it comes to homicide investigations, it's not like narcotics where we can have confidential informants and things like that. We are at some point in time forced to identify who our witnesses are. Now, one misnomer that a lot of the public has, and by talking and dealing with them, is that unless something goes to trial, and where discovery has to be provided to a defense attorney and their client, that's when the witnesses are made known to the defense team. If it's an unsolved homicide investigation, we are not out there putting your information out to the public and letting everybody know that you came and talked to us. And that's one reason that I've been told by several people during this job is that they don't come and talk to us because they don't want people knowing that they talked to us. Keep in mind that we're not out there just saying to everybody that we talk to that we talk to such and such witness. But if it does get to the point where it's going to trial, then yes, the information on who we talk to does eventually come out. And I think the prosecutor's office can speak to a little bit about, what we can do to postpone that. And then again, we're always open to creative suggestions that are sometimes successful. Creative investigations can be successful, but can be difficult. And we're always open to new ideas. Trial prep, if we get to the point where we're taking a case to trial, there's a lot that goes into trial prep. A detective can mitigate a lot of that by just keeping very detailed notes throughout the investigation. But, you're talking 1 or 2 years later, sometimes longer, before these cases are going to trial, and you've done a lot of other investigations in that time. So it takes a little bit of time to catch back up on these cases, what you've done on the investigation, so that you're back 100% up to speed on how everything went. Depositions, we get called in to do tape statements with the defense attorneys and things like that about what we did on an investigation that can be later used during the court proceedings. There are other hearings sometimes that come up that we have to let for bail hearings so that a judge can determine if they're going to allow bond for someone and things like that. But it really comes down to public cooperation. And I know I've hammered on that a little bit, but public cooperation is the biggest thing that helps us as investigators. And if we had the information that we know that the public sometimes has, or that we know a witness exists and we know they have the information but aren't willing to talk, if we had that, it sometimes makes all the difference in the world during these investigations and trying to figure out who is really killing someone. And then caseload, as Lieutenant Terry said, we do other investigations as homicide detectives, suicides. Sometimes we'll go out on some unknown circumstances cases and things like that. So there are other things that we do besides homicide investigations. But then, going back to that team concept, I might not be the lead detective on investigation, but if a case comes out, I'm usually going to be responding and assisting in some way with the investigation. We get tips that come in that we have to follow up on. Of course, we have to maintain our training levels, and we do those. I mentioned earlier that I'm involved in training. So one of my other roles when new detectives come to the unit is I'm one of a couple of people that actually train those new detectives on how to do the job. I'm also usually highly involved with a lot of the technology aspect that comes along with the job and helping other detectives that are not so tech savvy. And then we meet with prosecutors quite often, especially if a case has been filed, so that we can catch the prosecutor up and provide them everything that's happened on the investigation.
Great. Thank you, Detective Smith. And I want to remind everybody in the audience that the chat is open and available. So as you have questions, you can feel free to type your questions into the chat. And then as we go towards the end of the meeting and towards the end of the presentations, then I will start going through those questions to give back to the appropriate presenters. So with that, I now welcome Chaplain Patricia Holman from the Chaplain's office.
Okay, so the first thing I had is a problem with technology. Technology is not my friend. Okay, so though the chaplain's office is generally one of the few people that spend the most time on a scene, I will probably have the least to say. Our chaplain's office consists of 2 staff chaplains and 10 volunteer chaplains. Most of our chaplains are pastors from around the city. We have 2 priests, a rabbi, and an imam. And we are charged with providing chaplain service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, holidays included, which you can imagine is very difficult to do with 12 people. Generally, there is only 1 chaplain working the city on any given shift. We try to have 2 during the high volume shifts, but because we are short of manpower, then oftentimes we only have 1. Generally, our chaplain response time is anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, because again, as they're working the entire city, and most of them are volunteers, so they're coming from home. And so if you work on the west side and you're assigned a run that's on the east side during rush hour, it could take quite enough time to get there, but we do try to arrive as quickly as we can. The function of the chaplain's office is to provide a spiritual presence when there has been a tragedy throughout the city. And so we say all the time that the chaplaincy is a ministry of presence. And so just like tonight, I said, I won't have a whole lot to say. Generally, when chaplains are on scene, you won't hear them say a lot. We do a lot of listening because oftentimes when people are involved in a tragedy, they don't want to hear a whole lot of talk. I'm not there to push religion on anybody, and nor are we to try to put any one denomination on everyone. So even though we try to have diversity in both ethnicity and sex and religion, then we can have, any chaplain can represent any religion based on the needs of the people that we are serving. The one thing that we probably do more often than anything else is we go to DOAs. And I was just kind of overwhelmed when I first went to the chaplain's office is how much the chaplain really does. They make death notifications. We provide, as I said, spiritual support to victims who have lost family members due to trauma, be it homicide, suicide, death, or serious injury to children, multiple victims, accidents, overdoses, and natural deaths. Natural deaths occur in huge numbers in Indianapolis over the range of a day, a week, or a month. And during the time when the pandemic was at its worst, the numbers were at their highest. As I said earlier, we try to proceed to our locations as quickly as possible because we now live in a time where we're trying to fight against social media. I still find it appalling that people will go to the scene of a homicide and actually take pictures and put it on Facebook or whatever. But, you know, I know that that's not how I would want to learn of a loved one's passing. And so we try to make sure that that's not the way that our people hear about them as well. We try to make notifications face to face. We try our very, very best to never make notifications by phone because we don't know what's going on at the other end of the phone. I don't know if I'm talking to someone who has a heart problem or whatever. And so that's not something that I would want to tell someone over the phone. We try to always make our notifications to the next of kin. That is the person who has the legal right to that information. But our sole purpose is to comfort the family. We try to learn as much as we can, like you are tonight, about the process itself, so that we can answer questions, because people traditionally have a lot of them. We try to answer questions so that the detective is free to focus on the investigation. So we will try to provide as many answers as we can. We work with the coroner's office, with crime lab, and with victim assistance. So we believe ourselves to be a team, so that we are all working in concert to provide you the best service that we can. Keep up with me. Come on, Roger. But again, as I said earlier, chaplaincy is above anything else. It is a ministry of presence. I think that oftentimes just the fact that someone is there and that we're willing to listen provides a great deal of comfort to people. And so that is what we're trying to do. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions for me, you can either put them in the chat, or I believe that Commander Spurgeon is going to make all of our information available at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Chaplain Holman.
Thank you.
All right, so next up would be the Victim Assistance Unit Supervisor, Lisa Brown. Lisa?
Good evening, everybody. I'll start out by thanking our family. If you are here because you've had a loss, I just want to say I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that that this presentation tonight, you know, it hits home literally, and we're sorry that you. So our main concern at Impd Victim Assistance is it's a trauma. Families, we're concerned how you recover. Okay, are affected directly or indirectly. Two are obviously homicide, sexual assault, domestic violence, assaults, either simple or aggravated, robberies, home invasions, child abuse, elder abuse, sudden infant death syndrome, other traumas such as maybe a drowning or a bus accident. We help out with a lot of the schools that need crisis counselors to come in, industrial accidents, just any type of trauma, really. Homicide is obviously the most serious thing that we respond to. And on the scenes, we tag team very, very closely with the chaplains unit. So we are there to provide on the scene crisis intervention, just kind of help you hold it together. I mean, on a scene, your whole world is just blown up, and we're just there to help you get through it. We have a saying in victim assistance, we never tell people that they'll get over it. You won't get over it, but getting through it is completely different. So we're just there to help you on the scene to just get through that moment. We also have resources for after the fact for things like support groups, counseling, violent crime compensation. Let me tell you a little bit about violent crime compensation for a second. That is operated and managed by the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute. We help get the word out about that, but we do not manage that fund. We don't have any say over who gets money and who doesn't. But we do have people in our office that will help you fill out those forms if needed, or we can walk you through. You can do them online. We can help you, walk through that with you so that you fill it out correctly. We can also help you troubleshoot if you're not hearing from them. We've got people in our office that can call them and help you out with that. One of the biggest things that we do on homicides, though, is our support group, Survivors of Violent Death. We are now virtual because of COVID. We had been meeting in person. We're hoping to get back to that. But right now, it's virtual. And if you would like to join that, I just need your email address and I can put you on our list to get the invite every week so you get the link. But there's something about introducing families to other families that are walking down a really dark path. There's power in that. To be able to meet other people that have a clue of what you're going through. There's just power in that. And we like, introducing family members. Every homicide is completely different. Every homicide is different. However, the one thing that we know is that every single one of the family members, you have a gigantic hole in your heart the size of the Grand Canyon. And, we believe at Victim Assistance that nobody should have to walk through this by yourself. So, I absolutely welcome you to contact me. There are some people that don't necessarily feel comfortable being in that group because for various reasons. Maybe they're not a group person, or they just, have some anxiety about coming to group for whatever reason. We want to, make sure that you've got resources. We've got one-on-one counseling that we can hook you up with. So we've got all sorts of resources. If you want to talk to me about your specific situation, I welcome you to contact me. Thank you very much for being here. And I'll turn it over to Christine now. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa, and welcome, Christine.
Thank you. My name is Christine Hagan. I'm the supervisor of our crime scene unit at the Indianapolis-Marion County Forensic Services Agency. And I'm going to give you a background as to what the crime scene unit's role is in responding to and processing homicide scenes. CSSs are responsible for searching a crime scene, identifying, protecting, and collecting physical evidence for forensic analysis. We examine each item of evidence, collect trace evidence, recover swabbings of blood and DNA, and process evidence items for latent prints. We also properly package each item of evidence, seal the packaging, and submit the evidence to the property room for storage. We also provide testimony in court. Currently, there are actually now just 11 of us here, and we cover all of Indianapolis and Marion County. And our unit is staffed 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. When we respond to a scene, upon arrival, the very first thing that we do is seek out the lead or primary detective. We discuss important information regarding the incident that occurred up to that point. And we then complete what we call a crime scene walkthrough, where we will physically walk through the scene with our lead detective. It's really important. It's our chance to see the scene in its original condition and to discuss items for collection and to identify any specialty processing that may be needed. We then document the scene very thoroughly through scene notes, videography, still photography, and we keep complete sketches and measurements. Deceased bodies on scene. Bodies are part of the crime scene, and they themselves are very important evidence and contain important information for us to document and preserve. We do understand that these are family members, and we treat every decedent with the utmost respect. Like Detective Smith said, it's our time to slow the process down. We have one shot at processing this scene as thoroughly as we possibly can. It is extremely important that we document the decedent in its original condition and position. It helps tell the story of what happened. There may be fragile trace evidence, such as hairs or fibers or metal fragments that may be affixed to the clothing of the decedent, which is why we do not move the body prematurely. because it could very easily be lost. That's also why we do not cover the decedent with a sheet, because it is very easy for those hairs or fibers or metal fragments to attach to the sheet and then could potentially be lost. And that evidence is critical to the investigation, not only forensically, but it can potentially link a suspect to the crime scene and to the decedent. We have specialized scene processing techniques that we can use at a scene. One is called an ALS, which is utilized on crime scenes to visualize possible biological staining that is otherwise invisible to the naked eye. We have Blue Star, which is a blood enhancement reagent whose purpose is to reveal blood stains that have been washed out, wiped off, or also are invisible to the naked eye, and it results in a bright blue chemiluminescence. We trajectory documentation, where we have trajectory rods and lasers that can be used to assist in determining the travel path of a projectile or an approximate area of origin for the fired projectiles. We have trackstone and microcell casting. Trackstone is used at scenes to create a 3D detailed cast of footwear and tire track impressions. Microcell is a silicone casting material that we can use to cast tool mark impressions and recover latent prints that had been powdered on surfaces. The processing of evidence, very first thing that we do is complete a visual examination of each item of evidence. We recover swabbings for touch DNA and possible blood, and DNA can be found in blood, saliva, hair, tissue, and bodily fluids. And then we process our evidence for latent prints. And when we talk about latent prints, it is a friction bridge skin found on the palm surfaces of your hands and the plantar surfaces of your feet. We do have both physical and chemical methods of development and enhancement for latent prints. And it is sequential processing, and it's dependent on the type of surface that is being processed. So some examples, we have a visible print in blood on blue denim. We have a fluorescent dye where we can use an alternate light source to enhance and visualize latent prints. Some more examples are magnetic powder, cyanoacrylate, which is your super glue fuming. Ninhydrin is a chemical application that can be used on paper. We use heat and humidity, and it turns the amino acids in your prints purple. Gentian violet is a protein stain that can be used on the adhesive surfaces of duct tape or any tape. But there are also limitations. So we have various different applications and methods to enhance latent prints, but it is very dependent on the type of surface that is being processed. Textured surfaces are much better substrate for DNA collection, and smooth and non-porous surfaces are much better for latent print enhancement. It also depends on how the item was touched, the type of person. Some people are less of a secretor, which means they have less oil in their fingerprints and in their hands. If you have dry skin, you may be less likely to leave identifiable ridge detail behind, which is what we look for when we're trying to recover identifiable prints. And then there's always external circumstances, such as weather. If an item was out in the sunlight, or evaporation from a discharge of a weapon, or if it was out in the rain, that all has an effect on our ability to recover viable prints. Just to give you an idea of processing and completion times, routine crime scenes may take anywhere from 2 to 6 hours and upwards of 9 to 12 hours to complete full processing of a scene. It's dependent on the complexity, if there are multiple scenes that we have to respond to, if there are vehicles involved, such things as that. With the backlog created during the COVID-19 pandemic, turnaround times for full case completion have been significantly affected. But we definitely do our best to get results as quickly as possible. I will now turn the proceedings over to Chief Deputy Coroner Alfie Ballou.
Thanks, Christine.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here tonight. My name is Alfarina Baloo McGinty, and I'm the Chief Deputy Coroner with the Marion County Coroner's Office. I'm going to talk to you about the Coroner's Office. We have an elected coroner, Dr. Leandria Sloan. I'm the Chief Deputy. We have forensic pathologists, deputy coroners, autopsy technicians, and administrative staff all help to get to the end result of what our job is. We conduct death investigations to determine the cause and manner of those deaths. That does include death scene investigation, witness interviews, additional information that we gather from police, detectives, as well as family members to determine what the cause and manner of death is as we perform an autopsy or a death investigation exam. Next slide. So our deputy coroners work in conjunction with the forensic pathologist to determine the cause and manner of death. So at the scene, the body is examined, injuries are determined and documented, the scene is examined and photographed, and the decedent is then transported to the coroner's office. As mentioned previously by the homicide detective, we do have to leave everything in place so that we can capture that snapshot of the death investigation scene. It is oftentimes asked, why is a decedent out on a scene for such a long period of time? Before the arrival of the coroner, there's also the investigation by the detectives as well as by crime lab. And so what we do is we have to wait until all evidence is collected, and moving the body could potentially damage any evidence that may be on, near, or around the body. The decedent is then taken into the coroner's office where an autopsy or an external exam is completed. So identification is one of the more challenging things that we have to do. We can do that on scene with families. It can sometimes be difficult to make positive identification. According to Indiana law, the only way that positive identification can be made is by a family member with a photograph, dental records, DNA, or fingerprints. So oftentimes we will use any of those methods to try to identify a person according to Indiana law requirements. Sometimes finding families can be very difficult. So deputy coroners will attempt various methods, including looking through social media. Sometimes it means going through a cell phone or paperwork that may be found on, near, or with a decedent to identify who the actual next of kin is. In most cases, our office does try to work with other agencies outside of the Indianapolis area to assist us with making that notification. However, we do rely on their availability in other jurisdictions to help us with that process so that we never have to make that notification over the phone. But there are very rare circumstances where that has to take place if another jurisdiction is not willing or unable to assist us in making notification face-to-face with that decedent's family. When we bring the decedent in, there are various things that have to be done. The pathologists read through the reports, they look at photographs that are taken. Autopsy technicians prepare the body with full respect for an autopsy examination to take place or an external examination to take place. An autopsy is always completed on all homicide cases, but not on all other types of death investigations. During the autopsy, we work with crime lab as well as police, detectives, and other agencies to collect evidence from the body, including additional photographs, as well as collecting other information from witnesses or bystanders that may have been collected later during the investigation process. During the autopsy, we also take blood and urine and what we call vitreous, is a fluid from the eyes, to determine the toxicology, and that will give us the information on what drugs, if any, were in the decedent's system at the time of the death. So again, our main purpose is to determine the cause and the manner of death. So injuries related to what exactly happened or caused the person to die, whether that's a gunshot wound injury, blunt force trauma, or something else, is actually what we determine as the cause of death. The manner of death, as we're discussing tonight, is homicide, which is a category that requires the death at the hands of another. It is not the coroner's office job to determine if charges will be filed against anyone for causing the death to a specific person. It is simply the opinion of the forensic pathologist and the coroner to come to a conclusion on the manner of death. And in this case, it would be homicide, since that's what we're discussing tonight. The final documents would include autopsy reports, which would give a detailed finding of what the injuries were that actually caused and contributed to the death. The autopsy report is only available to the legal next of kin. Following the autopsy report, also there is a death certificate. The death certificate is processed and signed by the coroner or myself, the chief deputy coroner, which has the cause and the manner of death, as well as the circumstances that may have led to the death. All of that information goes on a death certificate, and the death certificate actually is public information that has to be obtained, not from our office, but from the county health department. Now I'm going to turn the session over to Dan Cicchini, the Deputy Prosecuting Attorney with the Marion County Prosecutor's Office.
Thank you, Alfie. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dan Cicchini. I'm a Deputy Prosecutor with the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. I supervise 2 of our major felony courts, or 8 of which are where these homicide cases, if they do get filed, will land. We are an office of approximately 180 attorneys, about 400 staff total. Ryan Mears is the Marion County prosecutor, and we all work under his direction. In addition to myself, we have approximately 48 prosecutors who may handle homicide cases. And in addition to those line deputies, we have about 18 additional supervisors who are also capable of handling those homicide cases that we're talking about tonight. Our goal when we file a case is to seek justice. And ordinarily what that means is that we want to file a case against the right person and that we have enough evidence to prove to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that we're going to be able to convict this individual of the charged crime. And one of the things, or one of the many things that we do when we are evaluating whether to charge a case and whether to take a case to trial and what to charge, is the evidence that we have. And we've heard a lot tonight about how that evidence is gathered, whether it's forensic evidence, DNA, fingerprints, firearms evidence, things like that. Oftentimes the difference maker in these cases is eyewitness testimony. It is a rare case that we are able to pursue a murder charge without the assistance of members of the community. Digital evidence is extremely helpful. As Detective Smith noted, we are seeing more and more surveillance videos, Ring doorbells, things like that. Cell phones and social media are a wealth of information, but there is no substitute for an individual from the community who saw or heard what happened to come in and talk about it. That's some of the most compelling information and evidence that we have, and compelling evidence for a jury to decide whether this individual committed this crime. One of the hurdles that we run into, because community involvement and participation is so important, is getting those folks to court, and that's a theme we've heard throughout tonight. A lot of individuals think that if they talk to the police on scene, if they give their statement at that time, that's the beginning and the end of it. Unfortunately, that's just the beginning of a very long process. A murder case takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months from the moment it's filed to the moment that it is tried, usually to a jury. That there's a lot of information contained in that, and it takes a lot of time to get ready to prosecute and for the defense attorneys on those cases to defend those cases as well. And we need that cooperation and involvement throughout the entire proceedings. And it can be difficult and it can be onerous, but we try to make the process as easy as possible. When individuals don't cooperate, it makes our jobs much harder to get justice for the victim and for the family members of the victim, because if individuals continually do not participate, sometimes courts decide that their testimony is not going to be permitted. And if a witness is excluded, they are not allowed to testify, potentially, even if we find them at a later date. And the reason that's so hard and so problematic is we only have one shot at this. We file a case with the intention of taking it to trial and convincing 12 members of our community that this individual is guilty of murder. And that's the only shot we get. If there's an acquittal, we can never try it again. So we want to make sure that we present the best case possible, we have the best evidence possible, and that we keep everybody involved in the case as an active participant.
And again, a little bit of a broken record here. Working hand in hand with the community is so important. As early as we can build that trust, we try to do so. We work with the IMPDs, homicide detectives, when they've got a case going and they're ready to file it. It often results in a little more work on their part, maybe some things they hadn't thought about, certainly things we hadn't thought about as we get to get ourselves up to speed on the case. And it's that partnership with IMPD that enables us to file these murder cases and to get justice for the family members. We're also very attentive to the next of kin and the victim's family members. We have a fantastic victims advocate staff at our office who do a wonderful job of maintaining contact and keeping those individuals updated about what's going on. We're usually meeting folks to talk about one of the worst things, if not the worst thing that's ever happened to them or a family member. Those conversations are challenging, but they're important because one, we want to build trust, and two, we want to build a partnership. On every homicide case that we try, it's not just the prosecutors, it's the victim's advocate, it's the paralegals, it's the secretaries. There's an entire team of individuals just at the prosecutor's office who are all working towards getting justice for your loved one who was murdered. So the team that is working on these cases, from the moment the call comes in to the crime scene specialists, to the coroner's office, to the chaplain's office, to victim assistance, we're all working towards the same goal, and that's to secure a conviction of somebody who committed a terrible crime. I look forward to hearing your questions.
All right. Thank you, Dan. We appreciate that. And so I'm going to go back into the chat area now and see what questions we have. So a question for Christine for Crime Lab. Has thought been given to the idea of having a portable tent type structure that could be placed over the body of the deceased? Could this help in, one, providing dignity to the deceased family and friends, two, help prevent evidence deterioration from rain or snow, three, help prevent onlooker gawking, and four, help prevent picture taking and Facebook posting of the deceased? Christine,
Yes,
you
I
there?
can answer. Yes. So yes, we do have both tents as well as screens. Each crime scene response van is equipped with a set of screens that can be deployed, but the situation has to allow for that. We do have to do certain documentation of the scene prior to being able to add anything. So it's very important for us to document the scene in its original condition. And then as long as there is not evidence located in close proximity to the decedent, if the situation or space allows, then we do quite often actually deploy these screens to help with the onlookers, viewing the decedent. Unfortunately, the picture taking and Facebook posting happens prior to us most of the time responding. We are pretty much one of the last ones to respond to the scene. You'll have officers who are securing the scene, EMS. At that point, you normally have quite a few onlookers already gathering, and then the detectives will respond, and then they request us. So that, unfortunately, hopefully the screens help with that a little bit. With the tents are very big structures, and we don't use the tents as often because it's a very big object to enter into and add into the scene. But the screens we use very, very often.
Thanks. Thanks, Christine. Appreciate it. Next question would be for Detective Gary Smith. Can detectives use information from Crime Stoppers? And if so, what are the limitations?
Yes and no. We have to be careful with tips from Crime Stoppers and treat them at least initially as lead information. What we have to do with that information is that we have to then go and investigate further and try to corroborate that information to be true and develop evidence based off of that information that can be submitted to court. So I always encourage anybody that's not that has some reservations about coming in and being an actual witness to a case to at least call Crime Stoppers and put that tip out there so that we have that information to work with, and then hopefully can develop evidence based off of that tip. I will say sometimes people do sort of investigations of their own, or they hear something that is, you know, third or fourth hand information already, and then they'll send that tip in, and then we pretty quickly know that it's not a good tip just based off of the physical or the evidence and the information we already have. So yes, we can use tip information from the tip line as long as we can then corroborate that based off of the other evidence that we can find with the case.
Great, thank you. Next question is also for you, Gary, and that is, what should families of homicide victims do if they have questions about a case?
Well, the big thing is communication with the detective. Usually you'll get notification about what's happened if you don't already know. And then once the detective is, you know, done the initial investigations, it's probably going to be the next day at the least, unless you're on the scene and the detective happens to talk to you there. Once you've established that line of communication with the detective, I always provide my phone numbers and my email address and everything like that. And you can always call or text. Now, as the investigation goes, especially early in the investigation, we may not have a lot of information for you, or we may be busy doing something that doesn't allow for us to answer your call right away. But you can always leave a message, send a text, shoot an email, and we'll try to get back with you as often as possible. And then we also have protocols in place where we have to stay in communication with the family of the decedent throughout the investigation for quite a while, so that they're at least kept up to date, even if that means letting them know there's not a lot of new information on an investigation sometimes. But you can always reach out to a detective and hopefully get a response pretty quickly thereafter.
Stay with me here, Gary. Got another one for you. What are the most common reasons as to why shooting incidents are not solved?
I harped on it quite a bit when I was doing my part of the presentation, and it's cooperation with witnesses. I don't know how many times during an investigation where I know that someone knows what happened and they just are unwilling. You know, one of the most frustrating things that I deal with as a detective is for a witness that I know knows what happened to tell me to do my job. Because I'm quite literally doing my job by trying to ask that witness what they saw or heard. So the answer to the question is cooperation from the public. We need people that know the information, that witness these things and whatnot, to come forward and talk to us, to let us know. And I think that we'd have a much higher success rate at figuring out who some of these people are and potentially bringing them to justice for what they've done if we had more cooperation from witnesses.
So one more for you, Gary, and actually this one will probably be a tag team answer between you and Christine. So the question is, shows like CSI seem to result in all crimes being solved. Why is that not the case in Indianapolis?
I think that I kind of actually refer to this as the effect. You know, a show like CSI is meant to be entertaining. Reality is, especially in situations like this, is there's nothing entertaining about it. And you know, in entertainment, you have to have a resolution. We'd love to have resolution in every one of our investigations, figure out who's responsible, and then bring them to trial so that they can be judged by a jury of their peers. But it's unfortunately, you know, not always the case. And then also with CSI, you have some things portrayed on shows like that aren't necessarily based in reality. So we might not have the ability to, you know, I've seen shows where they were able to see what the last image that the decedent saw based off of looking at their retina and a frozen image. That stuff's not real, so we don't have that type of things in real life. I wish we did, but they always have all the evidence that they need on those cases, and we don't always have that in our investigations.
Great. Christine, would you like to add to that?
Well, I think Gary answered that pretty thoroughly. Just like he said, the CSI TV show, it is meant to be entertaining. We do not have the technology that it portrays on the show. And with all of the processing techniques that we do have, like I said in my presentation, there are limitations. We can do several different steps of chemical and physical processing, but there may just not be evidence there. Or, you know, the fingerprints that we are able to find, they might be swipes. They may not have the ridge detail that you need for an identifiable print. And just because there's an item on scene doesn't mean that there is DNA on the item. We don't always find DNA, and we can't always find prints. And that's just the reality of true forensics.
Great. And Christine, we have two more questions that will be specific to you.
Okay.
So let me go with the first one, and that is, how do you apply for a crime lab job?
So you would apply when we do have job openings. It's through the city county HR website. There is a search, I believe it's a search box. You can specifically check for the crime lab, and anytime we have a job posting that's open within the forensic lab, you will get a notification via email.
And the follow-up question to that is, what qualifications do you need, such as college?
Okay, so we do require an undergraduate degree. We do look for hard sciences, so biology, chemistry, microbiology. We do also look for, there are several forensic programs out there now that we've had several applicants who just recently actually join us. They have forensic degrees, IUPUI, U of I, they all have great forensic undergraduate degrees. We can also look at criminal justice degrees, but it all comes down to experience too. So doing internships during your college career is very, very important to do. So that sets you apart from other applicants.
Great, thank you. So this next question would be for the prosecutor's office. Dan, if you're still with us, what is the criteria for filing homicide charges when there is no body found?
So there isn't a checklist, so to speak, in terms of what we're looking for when evaluating whether to file any homicide charges, whether there is a body located or not. The evaluation is effectively, do we think that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt the elements of murder? And murder is a person knowingly killed another human being. If there is no body that has been located, that becomes a challenging portion of the trial. It's usually one of the more straightforward things to prove because that's not usually an issue. When there is no body found, that is just a more challenging inquiry. We don't file many of them. That's one part of it, and part of that is because when somebody is murdered, there is a lot of information that is learned both from the scene where they were murdered or where they were transported to, and from the autopsy. And sometimes that information is what tips the scales to permit us to file a case or to enable us to file a case. And without that information, sometimes we just find ourselves without adequate evidence to be able to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm sorry, I don't have specifics. It's again, it's not a checklist. It's just, can we prove all of these elements? And sometimes without the body, oftentimes there is just not enough information. There's not enough evidence for us to make that decision.
And specifically in no body cases, what is the rate for conviction in Indiana?
That I do not know. I do not know about the other jurisdictions beyond Marion County, and I don't have that at my command right now. It's pretty rare that we would file a case like that, and part of the reason is how challenging it would be to prove at trial.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I have another question that generally is talking about lack of communication from detectives on cases. And so let me just say that the number one complaint that the homicide branch historically has received is a perceived lack of communication from detectives, lead detectives on the case. And there's many factors that play into that, but what I will tell you in a general sense is that if you are experiencing that, again, I'm going to give you, it's in the chat, but I'm going to verbally give you my email address. I want to know about those cases, and we'll look into what the reality of the situation is, and we'll get to the truth one way or the other. And many times there's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding, and so I hope to be able to sift through that and make it so that everybody has a good outcome. So again, my email address is Roger, ROGER .Spurgeon, SPURGEON @nd.gov. Let me see if we have some other questions here.
While we're on that topic, can I say something real quick?
Please.
So as far as communicating with your detective, one of the first things that I talk to once I've established who the family point of contact is going to be is communication with me. I'm pretty receptive, as I said before, about getting calls and text messages and responding to those as quickly as I can. But one thing that I always also talk about with the victims of the family members is that I give them the chance to decide whether or not they want to initiate the communication with me or whether or not they want me to initiate the communication with them. And the reason that I do that is because sometimes these cases don't get solved quickly, and sometimes, unfortunately, they don't get solved at all. So I don't want to contact a family member that might be in a good place, that a little bit of time has passed, they've had time to process things, and calling them just to let them know that there's just nothing new on the case. Now I've potentially opened up that wound for them again when they were having a good day, and that may ruin their day, their week, or even longer. So one thing that usually happens with my family members is that they decide to be the one that initiates communication with me because they're in a headspace where they're already thinking about it, and they're willing to hear the answers that I have, even if that answer is that I don't have anything new. For the family members that aren't getting much communication with the detective, keep trying to contact them. I have some family members that never call me, and they hear from me, when I have to call them, even if that's to give them no update. But then I have some family members that, contact me on a bi-weekly basis, and I try to talk to them every time that I can. So if you're not hearing from your detective, one thing too is make sure you have a correct number. A lot of times I've had family members that will call another number thinking that it's mine and leaving messages, and then I'm never aware that they've left me messages. So just keep calling them, keep contacting them. And when you do talk to them, have that open discussion with your detective about how communication should go and what works best for you.
Thanks, Gary. The next question would be for Coroner McGinty, and that is a two-part question. Is there a process in place for amendments to a coroner's report? And then specifically, if there is information that includes witness statements rather than just scientific data?
Thank you for that question. So our office does take significant time to gather all of the information, including witness statements, information from detectives, to determine that cause and that manner of death. If there is additional information that comes forward that can be presented to a detective or to our office, we will compile that information to determine if a cause of death or a manner of death should be changed. That does take meetings with the prosecutor, if necessary, or with a detective, and we have a group meeting with all of the forensic pathologists to determine what the opinion would be based on information that's presented to us that would allow us to confidently and comfortably change a cause or a manner of death. So we do heavily rely on scientific evidence, medical information and opinions, historically medical information and diagnosis, and information that we have at the time to make that determination on the cause and manner of death. We have had cases where we have been able to change or amend the cause and or manner of death based on the amount of information that comes to us. It can't just simply be just word of mouth information. It does have to be something that is going to be pretty relevant in the ability for the forensic pathologist and our team to change the opinion on the cause and the manner of death.
Thank you. So the next question is for Prosecutor Cicchini. Dan, when a witness comes forward and then is asked to testify, do the possible witnesses usually testify, or in today's world, do witnesses choose not to testify, fearing retaliation?
That's a great question. We do have a lot of individuals who do cooperate with us. They come to court, they come to depositions, they stick with the case throughout the entire process, which can sometimes take years. Particularly right now, cases are taking a really long time to resolve. And yes, we have a lot of folks who do that, who do the right thing. We also have a lot of individuals who decide that they do not want to testify. And there are only so many things that we can do to force somebody to come downtown. We can subpoena them, and sometimes that can result in judicial action and the court finding them in contempt if they continue to not obey the subpoena. But that's not a great way to build a relationship with somebody. So what we always try to do is we try to be as open and as upfront as we can. We take every precaution that we can in terms of witness information. When a witness is in any case, but especially in a murder case, we do not share with the defense the witness's address, phone number, other identifying information whenever possible. We keep that information confidential, and that's because we want to make people feel comfortable and we want people to be safe. We also have resources if people are concerned about retaliation or intimidation. We have resources, as does victim assistance, to potentially help people move, put people in a hotel if they're concerned for their immediate safety. We work with Impd to increase patrols in a particular area if there are concerns about individual safety. If people need to relocate, if people need help, we try to do that. And whatever we can do to help people cooperate, to help people feel safe, that's what we try to do, because so many times that is the barrier to us holding somebody accountable for killing somebody.
Thanks, Dan. I've got a couple more questions referencing, let's see, basically lack of responsiveness or updates from detectives on their cases, and who can we contact. Again, that goes back to me. If you feel like your detective is not responsive to your case, contact me directly, roger.spurgeon@indy.gov, and we will do our best to figure out what the issue is. Let's see. So when it comes to some of those specific questions, specific cases, those will be answered in another form via email. If you have put something in here about your specific case, please again send that directly to me at my email address, and we'll get it taken care of, but not in this particular format.
Captain.
Yes.
I had a couple of people send me messages directly rather than in the chat, and I've lost track of who sent those. If they still need to ask those questions, could you ask them to type it in the chat so that they can be answered?
Okay, so as you heard, if you send a private message to Detective Smith, if you could put it in the chat so that we'd be able to grab that and answer that in this forum. So I have a question about what is the Homicide Division's current caseload per detective? How does that compare to 10 years ago? I think it would be helpful for the victims' families to understand how much time is spent on one case. So as Detective Smith has talked about, time spent on cases can vary greatly depending upon the circumstances and evidence and cooperation and all those things that go into play with it. As far as caseload per detective, last year I think we had about it was 8 to 9 homicide cases per detective for the year, which on face value, that may not sound like a lot, but that's well above the FBI national best practices standard for how many homicide cases a homicide lead detective should have. We're currently working on that. The department is doing its best to juggle our resources internally, and we're actually making progress in being able to have more people assigned to be homicide detectives to be able to bring that caseload down. So we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel in regards to that. Let me see what the next one is. How old does your loved one's case have to be before it goes into cold case? And if it does, who contacts the family and lets them know that it was put in cold case? So there, at the moment, we don't have a particular time limit that a case is adjudged to be cold. It's basically whether or not all of the probative leads have been followed on the case, and that can be a wide range of time periods. And then when detectives leave, whether they get another assignment in the department or they retire, typically then those cases are reassigned to either another detective on their squad or in the cold case unit. So what I can tell you about that is this year we are doing a more of a microscopic look at the cold case unit and how we operate that unit, and I believe that we're going to have some changes in regards to that. That's going to be a positive both for the detectives in the unit as well as the community at large. So what I'd say is that's a work in progress right now. If your case is a cold case, can you have your child's belongings? It's a good question. And the unfortunate answer would be no. The reason is that homicide cases, if they're not solved, they're never closed. And there's a possibility that that case could be brought to trial someday. And in order to do that, we actually need those things that have been held as evidence months or years down the road. Those items could be critical to helping to prove the case, and I believe that Prosecutor Cicchini could probably add to that. In fact, Dan, would you like to say anything more, reference evidence like that?
Yes, thank you. That is a frustrating reality of this process. When we're meeting with family members and next of kin, usually that's one of the top questions that we get is when can we have our loved ones' possessions back? And because we don't necessarily know how that evidence, how that article of clothing, cell phone, wallet, whatever it may be, we don't necessarily know how that's going to fit into the case. Testing will not have been done. And in a situation where you have a cold case, the technology that existed at the time that the murder occurred versus the technology that could exist at the time the case is filed, that could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. The kind of forensic testing and the kind of information that we might be able to gather from that could be hugely different. And if we parted with that evidence, however satisfying or helpful it might be to the grieving process, we may inadvertently and unknowingly shut the door to a successful prosecution down the line. So that is why every piece of evidence is important. And it's not until we have that guilty verdict back from the jury that I would be comfortable releasing any kind of evidence like that.
Thanks, Dan. Detective Smith, another question for you. How hard is it to become a homicide detective, or what does IMPD look for in potential detectives?
Well, I guess that just sort of depends on the career pathing that you do as a police officer. I always encourage young officers that have ambition to become a homicide detective to always put in for as much training as early and as often as possible. At the time that I joined the homicide unit, as far as schooling goes, I was just a high school graduate. I have since received my degree in criminal justice, but I spent a couple of years, I spent about 7 years on the street and did various trainings, going to different detective schools, narcotics detective school and basic detective school and things like that, before joining the robbery and aggravated assault unit, where I learned to become a detective. And then based off of that, I moved over to the homicide unit about 5 years ago. So it really just depends on your training and your background, but always I encourage young officers to get as much training on board as they can, and to see and be involved with as much as they can in order to better prepare themselves should this be something that they want to try to do during their career.
Gary, another question, completely different topic, and that is, do you as a homicide detective look at cameras on houses or businesses?
Yes, quite frequently, actually. I talked about earlier, we do something called a canvas, where we go door to door, knocking on people's door to see if they witnessed anything, but also to see if they might have on their home or their business that might have captured something that would be helpful in the investigation. So yes.
Good deal. Okay. So another question came in: can a homicide detective work a crime scene if the victim is someone that they know personally? And while we don't have an in writing prohibition of that, that is something that we would very much try to not allow to happen, because there would certainly be potentially emotions involved, conflict of interest, etc. But if there would be any way possible, there is no way that we would allow somebody to work a case of somebody that the detective personally knew. So some other questions here is, as far as contacting about a cold case, that would be me. How does a cold case get reopened? They're never closed. So it's just a matter of further investigation. If there are things that can be followed up on, if anybody has information that are potential leads that maybe haven't been pursued yet, new things that have come up, please contact me. I'll get it to the appropriate detective for them to do a follow-up if that is appropriate in the case. Due to the increase in homicides, what additional actions are being taken to prevent future happenings? So the department as a whole, and not, you know, there may be others on this chat that may want to ring in as far as staff above me are concerned, but I do know that our department, the number one goal for the department is to try to prevent violence. And in operations, which is the uniform part of our department, and investigations, which is what we're a part of, we're all geared towards trying to prevent violence. From the investigation side, it's to be able to hold people accountable when the cases have happened. From the operations side, the uniform side is trying to prevent it in the first place. And there's been many, many different ways in which we are all trying to do that. Our leadership is constantly looking at best practices from around the country and developing our own best practices. So this is something that, this violence, unfortunately, that we've experienced, especially in the last year, is not just an Indianapolis problem, it's a nationwide problem. We're all struggling with trying to find better ways in order to assist in those things. One thing to think about is that it's also not only a police problem. These are things that there are many factors in our society that lead people to make decisions to become involved in violent acts. And so we need the entire community to help us in regards to trying to give people better coping skills to make different decisions and better decisions that don't harm other people. So for the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, the question is, why are there so many plea deals seems like the deals are made and the perpetrator is back on the street to reoffend time after time?
That's a good question. There are times and there are cases where we have to resolve it in a way that we're not happy about and that we'd rather we not do. Sometimes we charge an offense that at the time we charge it, we are confident that we can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt, and then things change. One of the biggest hurdles that we have, you probably won't be surprised to hear it after the conversation tonight, is witness cooperation. When we file a case and it is an armed robbery, for example, many times that is because we have an individual who is able to identify the robber, to identify the person who committed this crime against them. And sometimes that's the only evidence we have for identification. If it wasn't caught on video, if there isn't communication in a cell phone about it, if someone else didn't happen to see this happen, then we rely very heavily on the witness's involvement and participation. And there are circumstances where without that, we simply can't proceed. And that's a big reason why we end up offering plea agreements in certain cases. We try not to, but that's why we offer plea agreements in certain cases where it's a lesser offense or it's a sentence that is lower than what we would want. And it's because we just didn't have the evidence to prove the charge that we thought we could, and that we probably could with the cooperation and assistance of members of the community. That is one of the single biggest issues, one of the single biggest barriers to a successful prosecution of not just a murder case, but especially a murder case, but all sorts of criminal offenses.
Great, thanks, Dan. Another question is, can you change detectives? Typically, no. That is something that's rarely done, if ever. It has been done on rare occasion, but that is very case specific, depending upon what's going on with the case, maybe what's going on with the detective, the relationship with the family, etc. It's a very rare thing that we would change detectives as long as we have a level of standards that have been met in the investigation of the case. That's something that we typically will keep the same detective on it for the continuity of the case. And while there may be, certainly there can be personality clashes between detectives and some of the family members that are involved, we do our best to mitigate that. Another question that came in was, have we thought about using outside help, maybe private investigators, other sources? And while we have had consultations with some other people, maybe some folks who have some sort of specialty knowledge, we have to be very careful about what we share with anybody that's outside of law enforcement circles, that people who are not sworn to an oath to take care of these cases, because we definitely don't want to do anything that would negatively impact that should they make their way into the court system because of probable cause and the filing of charges. Another question came in, what mental health services are out there for the homicide detectives that are affected by all the tragic things that they see and experience? So internally, we have an employee assistance program that every employee of Impd is able to access, including homicide detectives. Also, we have an Office of Professional Health and Wellness for our employees for those things as well. So, Prosecutor Cicchini, if a person is prosecuted and acquitted, and then they later confess, can they be sentenced then?
If the crime to which they are confessing is the crime for which they were acquitted, there is unfortunately nothing we can do at that point. And that underscores the importance of how important it is for us when we have that case and we're ready to file it and we have the information and the witnesses on board. That underscores how important it is to keep all those folks engaged and to keep all that evidence to keep the integrity of all that evidence, because we do only get that one shot. And when we take that shot, we really work hard. We can never guarantee an outcome, but the goal is always to obtain a conviction because we think we've got the right person. So in a circumstance like that, if the crime that they are confessing to is the crime that they were acquitted on, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do.
Thanks, Dan. So Detective Smith, at what point in the investigation do you start talking to suspects like how I see on the first 48?
Well, that's really it's really case specific. There are instances where we have a case that we're investigating and we know right away who the suspect is. Either they've called 911 themselves or they've turned themselves in. So we start talking to them typically pretty quickly in the investigation. As far as learning who the suspect is another big factor that depends on when we can talk to them. If it takes some time, obviously it's going to be a while before we can get them in and talk to them. Now, there are other instances where we have a good idea or know who the suspect is pretty early in the investigation, but you always have to be mindful going into an interview with a suspect about what it is that you as a detective know before going and speaking with them. Because if you were to go into an interview cold and not know anything about the investigation, you're typically not going to get very far, and it's very easy for the suspect to lie to you about what their involvement is or to minimize what their involvement is. Whereas if you take a little bit of time as an investigator and you've had the opportunity to see the scene and everything that was recovered from the scene, maybe you've gotten into some digital forensic stuff from the phones or some fingerprints or some DNA or things like that. If you're armed with that information when you go into an interview with a suspect and they try to minimize or deny any role in that, sometimes as the investigator, you can use that to show them that you know that they're not telling the truth or that they're minimizing their role. And sometimes, not always, depending on your ability as an interrogator or an interviewer, that knowing that information and presenting the fact that you know that information unequivocally and can prove it sometimes changes the dynamics of the interview, and you'll actually get more out of a suspect rather than just going into it right away without knowing anything about the case.
Thanks, Gary. So Coroner McGinty, with the case open, are we able to get a copy of the autopsy report?
Yes, I'm sorry. If the case is still open in terms of the homicide investigation and the autopsy report is complete, yes, the autopsy report is available to the next of kin. We only send the autopsy reports upon request. We never want to mail an autopsy report to a family and they unexpectedly open a report and see such significant detail from that autopsy. And so we only send that upon request. If someone wishes to request an autopsy report, they can email Coroner, CORONER, at Indy.gov. That's coroner@Indy.gov, and make that request in writing to our office. If the report is available, if the report is not available, we will put in an information request and then mail that autopsy report when it does become available.
Thank you. Had another request for my email address. I typed it in again just a moment ago, and once again, it's roger.spurgeon@indy.gov. For the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, how often is witness protection used in cases?
It's tough to assign a number to that, but really as often as is necessary. I've worked on cases where we have used the Victim and Witness Assistance Fund to help relocate victims, relocate witnesses, and that we were able to achieve successful prosecutions in those. We try to make that available in every single case. If a witness is concerned for his or her safety, that is a top priority for us. We want to keep everybody safe. So we can use that money to help people move. If that's the case, we can use that. We can use those resources to help people get into a hotel room temporarily. We can assist with transportation. we can try to get creative in terms of assisting those witnesses to make sure that they are comfortable and to make sure that they feel safe. So we use it, we will continue to use it, and hopefully we will use it more so that we can keep individuals comfortable and confident in their safety and get them to the courtroom.
And Dan, a follow-up to that with a slightly different twist is if you have a witness that really wants to testify but fears for their life, how do you protect them? Do you have anything to add over and above what you just said?
So just that whenever there is a pending case, we've got a partner in Impd in terms of our detective. And that's something that I wouldn't hesitate to bring to Impd to make sure that is, and again, that is everyone's top priority. So if there was a specific threat, if there was a crime committed, if somebody was intimidating someone to try to tell them not to come to court or bribe them to not come to court or threaten them if they do go to court, those are crimes. And if we can develop the information about that, we can hold those individuals accountable, and we would not hesitate to charge someone with a criminal offense if they were trying to interfere with somebody getting to court and testifying.
Great, thank you. Chaplain Holman, if you're still here, question for you is, how do I become a chaplain or a volunteer? Is Chaplain Holman still here?
I did not leave you. If you're
great. Thank you.
interested in becoming a chaplain, you do have to be a member of an organized religious body, and then send a resume to our office. My email address is Patricia, PATRICIA .Holman, HOLMAN @nd.gov.
Great, thank you. And so there's a question about, is there anything further you believe our uniformed officers can do to assist responding detectives as it relates to evidence collection or scene preservation, anything to strengthen the case against suspects to help with the prosecution? So Gary, I think that might be a good question for you to address.
Yeah, I think I saw that question come from one of our lieutenants. I have different opinions on this. It could start, for one, with having a small rotation with a detective during the FTO process, in my opinion, because I'm of the strong belief that the better understanding a patrol officer has of what it is that a detective does, I think the better that they will be equipped to handle the scene. But that aside, obviously the most important thing when an officer responds to the scene is the preservation of life. So, you know, assuming all things are the same and there's no concerns for that, obviously beyond what we're already dealing with, it would just be a matter of making sure that we get that scene under control, both inner and outer perimeters, you know, getting witnesses separating. If there's a suspect, we get them detained, and keep that scene as close to, you know, the way that it was when it happened as possible, and then just gathering as much information as possible as they can without getting too involved in the real specifics of the case. If a witness is there and doesn't want to remain and whatnot, get their information. Try to at least get a phone number for the detective so that we can reach out to them later. But as far as homicide investigations go, it's a matter of getting there quickly, making sure that there's no concerns, additional concerns for anyone's life, and taking care of those if they do, and then just trying to preserve that scene as best they can and gather as much information as they can for the detective prior to arrival.
Okay, thanks, Gary. There's one more question for you, and that is, how or why are some cases not put on Crime Stoppers flyers? At what point does it happen that they get put on Crime Stoppers flyers? Can you kind of explain that?
Well, again, we kind of go back to that being a case-specific determination. Some cases, just like with the media, some cases it's beneficial to put things out on the media or out in a flyer to help with the investigation because of various reasons, and I couldn't even go into the specific reasons at this time. Sometimes, however, there is information that if put out there that it could actually be harmful to an investigation. One thing to keep in mind is that if there were no witnesses, for example, the only person that actually knows what happened on that scene 100% is the person who committed the crime. And if you're putting stuff out there that to let them know that you as a detective know something that they might not otherwise know that you know, it could, put them into hiding. It could give them information that when it is time to talk to them as an investigator during an interview, they can come up with an excuse or a lie around it, some sort of explanation. So, and then you also have some instances where, family members might not necessarily want a flyer. Now, I haven't really come across that, but there are some private people out there that don't necessarily want their information, their business out there. So, if that's something that you want to do, I've had families come to me wanting to help put out a reward for information and things like that. I usually put them in touch with Crime Stoppers so that can be facilitated. But it just really is case specific on how that would work and whether or not you would put information out there to the public.
Great, thanks, Gary. So we've had great questions tonight. I really appreciate that. I'll give you some time to ask some more questions. I'm not seeing any new ones at the moment, but in the meantime, I do want to relay the fact that one of the things that we have is what's called a homicide question and answer flyer that one of our detectives, Mark Howard, helped to craft. And I just want to let everybody know that that's available. It's a frequently asked questions flyer that family typically at some point in time or other benefit from the answers to those questions. That's available if anybody wants that. I'll be happy to send that to them. Again, send me an email and I'll happily send it to you. One of the things that we stress to our detectives is to try to help find answers to questions that they would have if these were their own family members that they're investigating. And our detectives really do care about what happens in these cases. They dedicate much time and effort to it. In fact, I've had some retired former supervisors and detectives reach out to me recently to let me know that they still care. They care very deeply about the citizens of Indianapolis and how we in Impd relate to those citizens, and very much are supportive of us wanting to develop the relationships with everybody in Indianapolis and have that good, helpful spirit, because really, while we as a police department can do what we do and we're skilled at doing the things that we've been trained in doing, we cannot be effective without the community's involvement. And so I know I've seen up to 100 or so participants in this chat so far tonight. I'm very happy to see that there's that level of interest. Again, we encourage you, if you're interested in these things, to reach out, have relationships with us, give us ideas, just like Detective Smith said. If there are things that you think of that we can do better or differently, or we can at least explore, let us know. We're happy to entertain those ideas. And so, again, I'm not seeing any further questions in the chat. Are there any of our presenters who would like to have any parting words at this moment?
Captain Spurgeon, I did have someone send me a question directly recently asking if all of our interviews with our suspects were taped. The answer to that question is yes, both audio and video whenever possible. There's a rare case when you might have a suspect approach an officer or start to tell you information in a setting outside of an official interview room where you might not have that necessarily rolling. But yes, whenever possible, we do audio and video interviews with our suspects.
Great, and I see that question coming through. There's a question about contacting Detective Gary Smith. Gary, if you could put your email address in the chat there so that they can contact you as well. And any other questions? Another question came through just now about do homicide detectives wear body cams? Currently, we do not. I don't know if there is a plan moving forward for that to happen. Right now, the main focus is to try to have all of our uniformed officers who are responding to runs on the districts have body cams, and making sure that as much as possible we have that transparency. In fact, got a comment about transparency being the key. It's very true. We're very much trying to be as transparent as possible, with the understanding that, and this is one of the reasons that we're having this conversation, is that there are things that, especially within investigations, that we are not at liberty to discuss with anybody. We have to hold back certain bits of information. We know that can be frustrating for people, especially loved ones of victims of violent crime. So we're wanting to have this exchange so that people can understand that we're not trying to be mean or mean-spirited about those things. It's just, as Mr. Cicchini could testify to all of us here, it's critical that we have that hold back information that only comes out in court and not through some other means. Dan, would you like to speak about that at all?
I do. Thank you. That is when we have our initial conversation with the next of kin and family members, that's one of the first things I say, along with trying to make them understand the process in the best way possible. It's that we're not going to share any information about the evidence that we have, about the facts of the investigation. It's not a matter of trust. It's not personal. It's just that the stakes are so high that we don't want to make any mistakes that we can avoid. And because of that, we don't share, what the evidence is going to look like. I always extend the invitation that I'll be happy to go over the entire case with you after the trial is over, but I just can't share any of that information beforehand because, again, we have that one shot to get it right and that one shot to obtain a conviction.
Great, thanks, Dan. So if there are no other questions or comments by anybody, I'll give it a moment here. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Anybody have any other words they'd like to? Seeing none, thank you all very much for your participation tonight, and we do hope to do this again sometime in the near future, whether it remains virtual or we are able to go back to in-person events or some combination thereof. We are committed to continuing to educate everybody and have this continuing dialogue. Thank you. Good night.